Several schools celebrating fresh state championships this Monday, but if you think way back, this was also about the time that high school gymnasts were celebrating across Montana. In tonight's Q2 Rewind, Scott Breen shows us when and why that high school sport disappeared in Montana.
1984, high school gymnastics seemed to be thriving across Montana, especially in Billings. It was a winter sport. Senior and West had combined for multiple state titles, and the Bears were on their way to yet another with this guy, Steve Hannaford, whose terrific skill at times actually may have hurt him with the judges.
We've talked to Steve about that he's going to pay a price for being as good as he is and having the potential to be even better. The judges will look for more and expect more of him.
Hanley told me Hannaford was the best he'd ever worked with. He said teams gathered for about 8 meets a season, several AA schools, along with Miles City and Glendive. But slowly in the mid-'80s, high school gymnastics teams started dissolving across Montana. It was an expensive sport to fund. It became tougher to find qualified officials, and some off-season programs were going bankrupt and losing community support. Senior and West were two of the last to go down swinging. They'd do just about anything to practice and compete, split time and shared those old foam mats with wrestlers. They'd sometimes practice in the school auditorium, cafeteria, and even hallways. But eventually in 1986, Billings was under court order to equalize sports, meaning adding one for the girls or cutting a boys' sport. School District 2 Activities Director Oscar Werdala.
We still do not have the same number of sports offerings, but we're working on that, and that's our #1 objective right now, is come up with the same number of sports opportunities for the girls as that we have for the boys.
Ultimately, the board realized boys gymnastics had relatively few participants, but the highest cost per capita. And when the school board failed on a tie vote to add girls softball, it meant one high school boys sport had to be cut. Students and parents made pleas to the board not to drop gymnastics, and even went so far as to bring their barrage of trophies as proof of success.
It's a sport that children of a smaller stature, if you will, can participate in, where most interscholastic sports in high schools are not available to them. It takes people who are nimble, agile, and yet strong, and it requires a great deal of dedication.
Trustees were evenly split on the issue. Some wanted to add a girls' sport so gymnastics wouldn't be uprooted. Others argued the district couldn't afford another sport, since voters twice rejected the mill levy. In Billings, Scott Breen for Montana's news station.
Scott tells us gymnastics ultimately was dropped from the curriculum in 1986, and in the name of fairness, the board then ruled that boys were allowed to become cheerleaders. Softball, by the way, launched as a high school sport in Montana soon thereafter. Now, as for gymnastics today, it's a private club sport. In fact, Billings will host the Montana State Gymnastics Meet this weekend. The girls' meet's at the Shrine Auditorium Friday and Saturday. The boys' meet takes place Saturday at the Billings Gymnastics School. Up next.